All right. Welcome everyone to day 2 of Lead Generation Week. My name's Michael Faree. Thank you for joining us today. We got 4 really great sessions planned for today. This first one, Demystifying the Buyer Mindset, is an excellent way to kick it off, and I'm really excited to hear the panel discuss a lot of the topics that we're going to be hearing. But first, I want to mention a couple things. I want to thank our sponsors, Leadspedia, Drips, and Fluent. They've all been really supportive of Lead Generation World and certainly Lead Generation Week. I also want to mention that if you have any questions, you have really 2 options to ask these questions of panelists today. You can enter it into the Whova app, which you may be watching us from right now, or you can click on the Q&A little icon on the screen, which will ask it directly into Zoom, which is what we're using, and the panelists will be able to see it as well there too. So either way is fine. Probably the most convenient for the panelists and speakers will be the Q&A icon on the screen that goes right into Zoom. So you can feel free to use that. Otherwise, I'd like to introduce Rob Seaver, the director of the Leads Council, and let him go ahead and take it from here. Rob?
Hey, Mike, thank you for having us. I appreciate Lead Gen World and Lead Gen Week kicking off this thing with us because this is super exciting for me. This is one that we've actually done a few weeks ago on a practice run for this. And I found every time we assemble such an esteemed group of buyers, there's tons of questions, tons of feedback, a lot of response. And so I'm really hoping to get that done today. I'm going to go ahead and quickly introduce our panelists. We've got a wide panel today, so I want to get through the introductions and then we can quickly get into the questions and answers. Also, Mike, we do have the ability to ask questions. Our panelists have agreed to do that, to answer them throughout, so make sure that you use the chat and or the questions feature inside the application. We're ready to go. Today we have with us John Galloway. He's the VP Business Development with Veterans United. I also have Bastian Cowsert. He's the Digital Marketing Manager with American Standard, the sinks and toilet company and faucets. Scott Gilman, National Marketing Manager with Sears Home Improvement, and Francesco Fagnini. I always want to say this when I say his last name because I was butchering it every time I used to say it, and he said it was Fagnini. He's the Vice President of Partners and Affiliates with Freedom Financial Network. So guys, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We've had a practice run on this, so I think this is going to be old hat for us, but I want to kick off. We've had an unprecedented event hit the industry, hit the world, hit everybody on the panel, and I want to go ahead and start off with COVID just because it's so pressing and it's what's going on in today's world still. I know that a lot of people are coming out of it and eventually getting back to somewhat business as usual. But I want to back up just a couple of months, and I want to talk about just some of the shifts in what we've been doing and talk about that. As I call on you, please let me know again who you're with and tell the audience what you do for the company, but talk a little bit about what life was like for you before COVID and then what life has been like since COVID. And I know everybody's like, I don't want to go first. Which one am I going to pick? John, you're the one smiling the most. So John Galloway with Veterans United. Let's kick off with you. Everybody's like, whew.
Yeah, there you are. So John Galloway, Vice President of Business Development with Veterans United Home Loans. We're a VA lender. We lend in all 50 states. My role is I work with our advertising partners, whether we're buying clicks, whether we're buying leads. That's kind of that's my bailiwick. So if you look at, I think a lot of the fundamentals remain the same. We still, and what I think this experience for all of us has taught us is where we were strong and maybe where we needed to improve, where we had really good feedback loops with our advertising partners, where we didn't, where we understood what success looked like and where we didn't. And we've also learned how many of us can work from home, how quickly, and I mean, just internally as an organization, what works and what doesn't. Who did you rely on having a hallway interaction with, and who did you actually have formal time set up with? And that goes with advertising partners as well. But the fundamentals have remained the same for us. And that is, and I think we're going to talk to this, understanding what success looks like, making sure you have those milestones in place and those systems set up that you can do that. That's what we've learned, where we're good and where we need to get stronger.
Awesome. You know, as unfair as that kickoff question was to you, John, what do you actually do? What is your role at Veterans United? What's your kind of day-to-day for that?
Yeah, I work with different advertising partners where, what we're trying to do is connect with veterans and military spouses to help them buy a home. And so we might be in the home search space, we might be in personal finance space where we are working with folks to place, relevant ads on either, whether it's content, whether it's, somebody searching for a home on one of the various real estate sites, and they raise their hand and they say, I'm a veteran or a military spouse. I did not serve in the military, but it's very rewarding to help somebody have that aha moment and be able to buy a home that they otherwise didn't think they could. So, but work with partners throughout the space, as simple as a click, as simple as a posted lead. Sometimes we even buy, it might be a live transfer. So that's my role.
Many of you guys probably don't know this, but John's from the beautiful state of Missouri, as you can see out his window there. And
the only guy in the office right now.
It's the only guy in the office, but John's wife is also running for governor of the state of Missouri. And so he may be on his next Zoom later in the year. He may be calling from a very different room.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe some Secret Service behind us. Thank you, John, for that intro. Bastian, I'm going to move quickly over to you. I know you're never without a story for us. Bastian's with American Standard. Bastian, I've been working with you for some time. We've actually trolled the floor of Affiliate Summit a couple of times. What's your role over there at American Standard, and what's life been like for you since COVID's hit?
Great, thanks, Rob. Yeah, Bastian Cowsert, American Standard. I'm the digital marketing manager here, and my responsibility is around sourcing, buying, and then optimizing leads for our home service business. And what's really interesting is from an internal perspective is the communication and how much it's increased. So American Standard is a division of Lixil, which is a company based in Japan. It's a $17 billion company, and we're just one of the divisions. And it's really interesting having the CMO of a $17 billion company asking how my email affiliates are doing this month. So the amount of communication both up and down the chain has increased significantly.
That's great. I'll get back to you in a little bit. I know that you have a story to tell us later on. Scott, it's really crazy knowing that you come from Sears Home Improvement, the brand. I know that you also operate under another name. Help me understand, what's your life like over at Sears Home Improvement? What's it been like? Obviously everybody knows Sears. It's a staple of, I grew up with that name in my life. And so help me understand what you do for Sears Home Improvement, and what's your day-to-day like, and what's it been like since COVID hit you?
I do the outside lead buys, similar to what Bastian described. I work primarily with lead aggregators. We buy between 3,000 and 5,000 leads a day. And our purpose is to get those leads to our call center so they can convert them to appointments for the sales guys to go see folks. Well, in today's world, folks either don't want us to go see them, or we're limited on who we can go see. So we cut back a lot on our inside lead buys. In other words, lead buys for inside products like flooring, kitchen and bath remodels. Focus primarily on outside, the products that were considered exempt. We cut back our leads, we increased our quality, we worked closely with our vendors to make sure that we were getting exactly what we wanted, and did quite well with it. We also moved to virtual with our call center. Everybody went home. Most of the employees in our home office went home, and we all have worked very well in a virtual environment. We converted our sales to online, at least in many categories. So our salespeople can now operate across the country. They're not limited to certain areas, and they can do everything virtually. and a lot of changes in a hurry. And now we're working on improving those processes.
In the, Bastian, this is a question for both you and Scott. In the home services industry, are you starting to see things open up in states where you're picking up now, able to get back in the homes and some of the purchasing? I see you both shaking your head. Yes, I guess so.
Yep.
Some people,
people are allowing us back into the homes. What we're starting to see is that there's a lot of folks that are still worried about the disease. And so they're asking us to work with them virtually.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing too.
You are. I would probably want to get into this a little bit later about, are we going to see some of these trends or some of the things that we've adjusted to COVID wise? Are we going to see some of these stick? I think we probably will, at least for a little while, but maybe even for a longer while. Francesco, what's life been like for you? And Freedom's such a big network. I mean, in your name, it's Freedom Financial Network. And I know that you work on the debt side. What's life been like for you? What do you do for Freedom, and what's COVID been like, and where are we now?
Yeah. So, Francesco Fagnini, Freedom Financial Network. So we, own and operate a debt settlement service as well as a personal loan service. So for us, it's been pretty interesting. We have over 2,300 employees, and within 3 weeks, everyone was working from home, which was an amazing job by the team there to get everyone remote. So that was kudos to them. But, for us, we've seen, for the debt side of the business, it's pretty steady. There's been a bit of more hesitation to join the program because we're kind of in this unknown period, but it's been pretty steady. I think this on the personal lending side, that's where we've seen a dramatic kind of pullback, right, by capital markets. These are unsecured loans, so they are a little bit higher risk. But we've been able to kind of weather it through. We're starting to see the capital markets slowly come back a little bit for next month. And we were able to kind of shift a lot of these employees who were working on the personal lending side and kind of bring them over to the debt side. So it's been an interesting time, but we think the future's strong. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I was reading an article this morning. It was interesting. It was talking about how Q3 might be the greatest comeback in the history of our country financially. And so just because this, the de-escalation or the deflation of our economic situation was manufactured, it wasn't as a result of slow economic growth. So it's going to be interesting how the rest of the year pans out for a lot of the different verticals. The reason I started there, I wanted to see and hear some of the terms that you guys were throwing out without actually defining them first. And one of the questions that I have is that, when I first got into this, and even today, as I start hearing some of these terms thrown about, I hear advertiser, I hear publisher, I hear media buyer, I hear, lead gen buyer. Can you help me a little bit? Because lead aggregator, is there somebody on the panel? I'll look and see if there's a raised hand. If not, I'll call on you. But is there somebody on the panel can break down some of these terms? Like, for example, lead aggregator. Scott, you said lead aggregator earlier. What does that mean? What is a lead aggregator?
It's a company or group that buys leads from multiple sources, aggregates them, and then sends them on to us.
And you guys are considered brands. So yes. Are you advertisers? Do you buy from publishers? John, do you want to take that one from me?
Yeah, we do a little bit of everything. So like Scott was saying, we certainly will buy posted leads from aggregators. We'll certainly, maybe different websites may convert their own traffic to a lead and then post it to us. And then some people are just sending clicks to our site where it's hitting our landing page, and we're converting it. And you may pay on a CPM on that. You may pay on a cost per click model on that. So there's different models. I think they're very consistent across verticals, but in mortgage, that's how we're thinking about it. It all comes down to who, the conversion rate and what actually works out better for the site. The traffic's either coming from if you have a better conversion rate on your landing page.
You guys also buy media as well, right?
Yeah. So we'll buy media that goes to our landing page. Actually, I read a document recently from Leads Council, the Lead Buyer's Guide, and I've been working in this for 7.5 years. And when I read it, I was like, oh, that's what I should be saying. And then I handed it to a couple people in the office and said, this may be too old. You've been in this for like 10 years, but maybe your new hires would like it. And first off, they said, yes, our new hires would like this because it was just nice checklists, nice definitions, and provided some clarity. But the people who had been working for 10 years responded, I wish I had read it 10 years ago. And it actually just kind of clarified what it is I do around here.
Yeah, it was interesting because as I was putting this panel together a few months ago, we were talking about buyers on this panel. Obviously, you guys are traditional in the buying sense, but I also was looking at, companies that sell leads as well, because they buy a lot of the aggregators. They buy as many as you guys do, and just resell. And a media buyer isn't necessarily considered a lead gen buyer as it relates to that. And it was just confusing, I thought. Yeah. Not only to me being in this role for 5 years, I'm still hearing terms that are thrown around. And a lot of times I don't know that everybody stops and asks questions on what does that really mean and how do you guys intersect? So, you guys are the brands. Obviously, we recognize these names as a consumer, but you also go out and you purchase leads. And in some cases, like Scott, I know that you had a surplus of leads earlier this year and that you were looking to shop some of those around. So you, in essence, became an aggregator of leads and then a reseller, right?
We still do.
You still do. So it's really interesting. If there's anybody listening on the call today and you have a question about a term that we throw around, please don't hesitate. There are no questions that are dumb or not smart. I can attest to the fact that most of these are things I'm learning on the fly myself. I want to turn a little bit. We've talked about COVID. We've talked about how the whole ecosystem has been turned on its head. I would like to say that just by talking to most of the companies, especially the council companies, it seems like that pivot was done very quickly, and I wouldn't say easily, but it certainly was something that we've been able to get out of the way and get back to somewhat business as usual. Has there been anything that you guys have missed about this? I know it's a kind of an unfair question, but in this pivot, in the turn to adjust, for example, how has it been not getting to go to shows? Bastian, I'll talk to you about it because obviously you and I, we attend these shows and we go through and we talk one-on-one. What's your life been like trying to do the same relationship building? And are you able to do that? Or is there a part of going to a show that you can't replicate over the phone or a Zoom conference?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't, nothing will replace the face-to-face, right? And it's really interesting when you're walking show floors and you're talking to people. It's also interesting to see, who and who they're talking to as well, which is, when you're in lead buying, it's a very small community, right? And so you can see obviously who you work with, but also who, your people or your partners or lead aggregators, like who they're working with. And so, yeah, there's just no replacing the face-to-face. Obviously the Zoom calls and whatnot has tried to mitigate some of that loss, but as far as American Standard and me reaching out to new publishers, that has definitely decreased since the COVID has come out.
What's the best way for anybody on the call that wants to get a hold of you? And I'll ask this to other people on the panel. What's the best way to do it now? Is it through LinkedIn? Is it, some other way? Do they pick up the phone and call American Standard and say, I want to talk to a lead buyer? How does that work?
Yeah. So I think, LinkedIn and email are the best way to contact me. I think my information's in the Hoova app under my profile, but those are honestly the best way. And then, just like everything else, like the nail that sticks up gets hit. And so like everyone else, like I'm responding to a million different emails a day. And so, persistence is definitely a value that I virtue. And, if I don't hit you on your first email, maybe I'll hit you on your fifth or sixth.
Persistence, fifth or sixth. I remember you telling me a story about how first time out of the gate is never the best time, right? You just, there must be a second, third, or fourth attempt at things to work with you. Are you open to looking for new vendors? I mean, is that something that's still going on? I know that Eric Kozak, one of the people that you report to, he indicated that as COVID hit, your lead buying budget was pretty much cut in half. Have you seen an increase or a tick up on that?
Yeah, for sure. The business is definitely pivoting. And I think what's really important too is to understand is we're doubling down on spend for partners who are kind of sharing the burden with us, right? And that's what a true partnership is, right? Where, as American Standard, this is a home service business, and most of our products are focused on the senior demographic, which obviously is the most affected by this COVID. And so, we're relying on our partners to, optimize their mix, to optimize the leads that they're sending us. But then the partners who, want to bear more risk with us throughout the lead buying cycle, instead of working on a front end on a CPM or cost per lead basis, kind of go down that funnel a little bit from a cost per demo or cost per appointment or even a cost per sell. Those partners have done really well, with us, because essentially, the proposition I make to a lot of my partners is, hey, if you want to go to cost per sell basis, unlimited budget, right? Which really helps them, because there's sunk media costs if they're buying media and they can't sell leads. And so that's an easy win for them. But also it helps us to, communicate up to the business as well, as far as, what kind of volume we can expect. And American Center is definitely turning the corner. We're definitely ramping up.
So true performance marketing there, right? I mean,
for sure.
It's really cool to hear that. So you are looking for new vendors too, right? So is that what I'm hearing for you, is that you're looking for the right vendor? If they've got a product that matches up for you, you're interested in talking to them. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
Maybe on the 6th attempt, but at least you're interested.
Yeah.
Francesco, I saw that you laughed at that one. Are you, I mean, obviously you talked about debt being an area right now during COVID that's in interesting flux, but for you, are you always seeking new vendors? And, I want to also add to that question, what's it like to select a vendor for you? What's that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for new vendors. I think, the ones that kind of get in the front of the line, I would say, are referrals. So we, through my network and the network that the teams that I manage have, if the email is a referral, usually one email is enough. If it's kind of out of the blue, then yes, it might take 2 or 3 emails for us to get back to you. Because there's definitely a lot of people who are always asking for budget. But for us, when we're selecting vendors, like I said, referrals are always the best for us because we are getting it from a trusted partner or someone we know within the community that we either work with directly or just someone, that we've have met. So I think that's always really important. When it's someone that's more out of the blue, then we do a lot of kind of searching, right? We look at LinkedIn, we try to understand what's their presence in the market. A big red flag for me is if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you're probably not a legitimate seller. That's a pretty simple one. So we'll do that. A lot of times we'll actually call people for referrals as well, or, talk to somebody, say, hey, have you heard of these guys or these people? Have you worked with them in the past? Once we get past that point where we say, okay, let's talk to that person, then a lot of it is, let's see your advertising, let's see your flow. How do you collect the lead? Going kind of through the due diligence of understanding the consumer journey and how that lead's going to end up with me eventually, right? Or with our company.
So can people reach out to you also via LinkedIn? Because obviously, I guess you have a profile now, since it'd be questionable if you didn't.
If I didn't, yeah, no, LinkedIn, and I think, direct email is always the two biggest for me.
Direct email. Okay. We'll try to get some of that contact information. John, there was a question from the audience that said, what's the testing process and period look like for a new vendor, and how long do you perform that test? Before you answer that, I want to go back because I'm skipping around here because you're in a vertical that for me is an anomaly, in the sense that there are some rules, some compliance rules that are different for mortgage versus home improvement. And we've gone round and round on this. And although I don't want to open up an entire can of worms, I know how you feel about the rules in mortgage and from a Veterans United standpoint. So when you go back in and say, what's that testing process? Help me also intertwine that question of compliance in there, which I'm going to come back and ask everybody else, but I think it's a good segue for you to talk about that. And what's that like, and how long does it take to test somebody to get them on board?
Yeah, I mean, when we're looking, and just like everybody else, we're always looking for new partners. That is not something that was lost during this. It's as important as it's ever been. People are having success. We certainly want to work with them and connect interested customers with what we offer. Every new partner we bring on board is going to go through a compliance review. I kind of look back to, and I think that that's every vertical in mortgage that is going to be looking at, if you're sending traffic is different than posting a conversion. So in the mortgage vertical specifically, we look for a posted conversion to come from a licensed mortgage company, licensed mortgage broker, somebody who has an NMLS number, which is the National Mortgage Licensing System. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look that they stay in compliance. And obviously going to look at TCPA as well. That process is going to be us working hand in hand with our legal team, and then we're going to continue ongoing vendor reviews for the life of a campaign. In terms of a test for us, did I answer your question there, Rob?
Somewhat. I'm going to dive a little deeper into some of those things, but yeah.
Yeah, we could spend the next half hour talking about mortgage.
We have before, yes.
Yeah, but and I think it would be acknowledged, and something the Leads Council has been talking about, is not everybody interprets laws and regulations and rules the same. That's why we all have lawyers, is for that differing interpretation. So, but that's where we're looking at. And then a test for us, you at least are testing for 30 days to 60 days before we'll have a true tale of the tape. And if you look at mortgage, somebody looking at a home, interested in a home today, legitimately may not close on that home for 9 to 12 to 18 months. So that's another thing I think somebody may have asked about KPIs.
KPIs, yeah.
I think every vertical has early metrics up in the funnel that can tell them likelihood to produce whatever it is they're trying to produce. And obviously in a mortgage, we would like to see people close. That's the whole point. And so, but you have to have, and I think that this is every organization has to determine what those early metrics look like so that they can adjust their campaigns. Because if we're waiting lead to maybe 18 months to close, how do you optimize anything? You can't optimize anything you're doing. It's not good in any business relationship. So, but we're going to start off with that vendor compliance, licensing. We're going to ongoing monitor. Say you turn off licensing for some reason, we would then maybe not buy a posted lead, but we can buy traffic, and that's I think every vertical is different, but that's just mortgage.
That licensing to you, I know that I've talked to you about it. Every state for you, when you're choosing a lead from a vendor, every state has to come from, every lead has to come from a state where it was generated from a licensed lead generator. Is that correct?
Correct, including the District of Columbia. We don't blend in the territories, but if territories have licensing as well, so you can be
It's interesting. I don't know that that's a 100% an agreed practice across the thing. But for you, one of the things that you talked about at one point earlier was that not only do you believe that the every state requires a license, or at least in general, there is some language there that requires it. You've made the determination that every lead needs to come from a person licensed in that state. But you also said that from not only just a compliance standpoint, but you also said that the quality of that lead tends to be greater from those that are licensed in those states. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is true. Folks who are licensed tend to be brands. They tend to drive us. Their marketing is held to different scrutiny. I mean, let's just pick on Iowa. If you're licensed in the state of Iowa and you're going to be examined by Iowa, you're going to have to produce your advertisements to the state of Iowa, and that's going to be a lot different scrutiny than if you are not having to, show a mortgage regulator what your marketing looked like. And why was that compliant? And why was the claim that you made okay? When you put yourself in front of, I'm just picking on Iowa here, in front of Iowa and say, this is okay, then it's a different level of traffic driving. It's a different level of quality that we're going to see. And there's an expense to licensing. I'm certainly not one to say that it's not, but we do see it bear out. And I also think when a customer comes through and sees that, there's an initial stamp of approval where their conversion to a lead means more. And we're working with a customer who has more intent to go through the home buying process.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Bastian, I want to move to you. We've walked the floors of Affiliate Summit. I mentioned that at one point earlier today. And I remember you asking, because actually I asked Eric this, I said, so what's Bastian out there looking for? What's he, trying to find out? Because I mean, obviously there are a mixed variety of people on the floor at Affiliate Summits, and not all of them are a good fit for you. What are you looking for? What are kind of the KPIs also that you're trying to get out of a vendor when you go to Affiliate Summit? And what does some of that vetting process for you look like?
Yeah. So, I like to think of American Standard as like a big container ship. You guys seen these, right? These humongous ships that have all these little containers stacked up with hundreds of $1 million worth of product. And, sometimes that ship breaks down, right? So every ship has its own in-house mechanics that try to fix things. And so, a situation could be where a ship is not, it's in ports, all loaded up and it's ready to go. But for some reason or another, the engine just dies, right? The captain doesn't know what's going on. And the mechanics on the boat, on the ship, are trying to figure it out. But every minute that ship is loaded in the port is costing thousands of dollars, right? And so sometimes you need to bring, in help, right? So the captain on the ship, calls an expert mechanic, and this expert mechanic goes on the ship. He talks to all the mechanics that are, on the ship already. And then he kind of goes to the engine bay and he looks at the engines, and these engines are humongous, right? They're 2 stories, hundreds of $1 million worth engines. And, kind of looks around a little bit, and, he's carrying this little mechanics bag, and he pulls out a hammer, and he walks over a certain part of the engine and just like reels back and smacks it with a hammer. And all of a sudden the engine starts going up again and they're good to go. And then the captain's, relieved. Hey, our ship is working. We can go. Thank you very much. And he's walking the mechanic out, and he turns to him and says, so, what's this going to cost? The mechanic turns to the captain and says, well, it's going to be $10,000. The captain's like, Craig, like you were here 30 minutes, $10,000 for 30 minutes. Are you kidding me? Like, what's the deal? It's like, well, sir, it's the repair is $10,000. Whatever, just send me an invoice, and I'll address it when I get back. So the captain makes his run. He comes back. He gets to his desk, and sure enough, here's an invoice for the mechanic services. And it's an itemized invoice. And the first item says, hitting the engine with a hammer, $100. And then the second item says, knowing where to hit, $9,900. Right. And so there's definitely benefit in knowing and working with people who just know where to hit. Right. So American Standard is a big company. We have a lot of internal media buying. And so we like to work with vendors, whether they're big or small, but they just know where to hit and have proven performance. And so for us vetting, it's really having an understanding of knowing that lead aggregator or partner knows how to buy the media and where to source the media. We've spent millions and millions of dollars, and I value small business, but at the same time, I don't want to pay the tuition to learn how to buy the leads for me, right? I've already paid that. And so, that's really kind of where it starts is, seeing past performance from a cost per lead all the way through a cost per sell, and just trying to find people who just know where to hit.
I have no idea if you really answered my question, but I love that story. I have to be honest. Who wants to follow that one? Thank you very much. I do understand knowing where to hit, not having to pay for somebody else to learn on your dime. I certainly appreciate that. And, I really do believe that that's what I witnessed when I walked around and watched you interact with a lot of these people on the floor. You have this process, and I've watched it several times, where you can identify that person who knows where to hit almost instantaneously with the first few words of their conversation. And so I love that you have that thing nailed down. Scott, what's it like for you when you're out there vetting your vendors and looking for, what kind of KPIs are you looking for?
I think, like Bastian, we have certain questions that we ask most of the providers, and we try to get a feel for their level of education. So to know where to hit, you've got to understand your business. And there's a lot of people out there that say they sell leads. In truth, they really are a little unsure as to what they're doing. They're going to send you a bunch of volume and keep their fingers crossed. We've got some pretty extensive KPIs. And so we will ask a vendor to send us a certain number of leads, usually for a reduced price. And we'll evaluate what we get. We'll make a decision on whether or not we see value. We'll feed them back information. We'll give them a chance to optimize. And then we'll just look at the results. We're also talking to other vendors. We're asking folks about the companies. We've got a lot of contacts in the industry, been in it for a while. And so I have the opportunity to talk to folks and see what kind of results they've been getting. We're looking at TCPA standards. We're looking at to see if they have things like Active Prospect, Trusted Forum, if they're working with any of the companies that just any good vendor is going to have. And beyond that, we're going to test. And our test usually 3 months. We're going to test with $25,000 to $50,000, and we're going to see what the results look like.
Francesco, when I move over to you and look at this, I also would like for you to piggyback on that if you have anything extra to add. But, do you find that buying leads, inbound calls, live transfers, is there any value? I mean, what works best for you, and what have you found that mix, and also what sort of KPI do you look for?
Yeah, I think, I think a lot of it has to do with how your team, what they're best at, right? So, some call centers are better at outbound calls. Some are better at warm transfers and getting an inbound call. Some do better with posted leads. Some do better when you just have traffic generators sending it to your owned and operated websites, right? So I think a little bit has to do with understanding your call center and what they're good at. We've gone through a process where we were very good at outbound calls, right? So for me, working with traffic generators who send it to my owned and operated works really well. They're introduced to the brand. They call out on the lead. The consumer already knows that we're going to be calling them because it just filled out our form. We've worked to kind of make specialized teams recently. So we decided, hey, we need to be better at inbound calls. So we've been able to kind of create teams that are really just inbound call focused, right? So I think understanding your call center is important too, as far as what type of leads maybe work better than others. As far as KPIs are concerned, I mean, there's the basic ones, right? Contact rates, the first thing, right away. Can I get a hold of someone? For us, we have KPIs that looks a little even deeper. Contact rate with intent, right? So we will look at that and say, okay, of all the people we called, how many picked up the phone and actually wanted to have a conversation? For us, on the debt side specifically, the average talk time is 2 hours before someone decides to join the program. And that's over multiple calls, right? So it's not just one call and close. There's maybe a few of those, but most of them are 2 hours, 5 to 6 phone calls. The product's not very well known, so you have to educate the consumer, right? And make sure it's the right fit. So we look at that. We have multiple steps from, step 1 to 5. So we'll look at step 3, how many people are getting to that step. So we're looking at things like that. It doesn't take 18 months like maybe mortgage does, but it does take 30 to 60 days usually to really understand closes. So we're definitely looking at early KPIs all the way through. Well, we have a 5-step system. So I'm looking at all those steps along the way and how they're progressing through those steps.
Awesome. John, moving on to you, when you're looking at these vendors and you're selecting them, do you give them the checklist? Like, do you make them hunt for it and work for it? Or do you tell them, hey, look, well, obviously they have to be licensed. Obviously they have to have this, but I mean, outside of that, some of the other nuanced KPIs and some of the other things, are you willing to work with them? And do you spend time getting to know these vendors? Or are they just a product for you?
No, we're working with them and we're educating them on what we're looking for. I mean, everybody's talked about those early KPIs that eventually lead on our back end to somebody closing on a home loan is something we're working with them on. The one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to, if they're going to be putting offers out via email or anything like that, we're going to review that. We're going to potentially question it. We're going to talk. I mean, we have a pretty good idea of what we should pay based on how they're marketing. And so we'll be pretty candid on that. If you're offering somebody a free iPad, well, I can tell you the lead's not going to be worth very much. If you're saying, hey, do you want to buy a home and are you a military veteran? That and somebody actually transacts, that's worth more. And we're going to be upfront and honest with them on that. But and we may be a little less interested in the free iPad, but and that's a pretty extreme example. But we're going to work with them ongoing, help them tweak their messaging, and try and be a partner, because long term their success is our success. And if we succeed and they don't succeed, then they're going to leave us. And if they succeed and we don't succeed, we're going to leave them. So it's a partnership. It's going to be working hand in hand. And I think everybody on this panel has something very unique and about them where they have some tricks of the trade. We're no different. Working with military veterans is a lot different than working with civilians. So we're going to have to work. And it's also, just 10% of the market. So it's a little specialized, so we're gonna have to spend some time.
There was a question that came in, but I remember when you were talking about licensing and buying from licensed vendors, it doesn't mean that vendor has to be licensed in every state for you to buy from them. You will buy leads from them in the states that they're licensed in, right?
Yeah, so if they're licensed in Oregon, I'll buy leads from them in Oregon. If they're licensed in Alabama, I'll buy leads from them in Alabama. But if they're licensed in Alabama, but not licensed in Florida, I'm not going to buy Florida leads from them, because it's the way mortgage banks are regulated. Mortgage banks are regulated in all 50 states, every territory, District of Columbia. Your bank, Main Street Bank, the bank you go make deposits at, has like a global license, and so it's just a little different on how it's done. But we're going to get examined 20 to 35 times a year by lots of different states and federal agencies. So we want to be able to stand up to that scrutiny.
Great. And Bob, Edmund, if I didn't answer that right, or John didn't answer that right, ask me again, and we'll ask that question differently. Bastian, your story of hitting the spot. Do you tend to be pretty blunt with these vendors and treat them very methodically, or do you actually have some nuance in that relationship and help them understand how to be a better lead provider for you? Or do you give them a definitive list of what is it going to take to do business with me?
Yeah, we definitely give a list, and I think that's beneficial for the relationship, right? Because we're just always trying to manage expectations with our business, and then they need to manage expectation on their business when they do buys and whatnot. So we're very front forward with data as far as how the lead's performing. I often get the question from these lead aggregators of like, what works well for you? just like Francesco said, some said, some call centers work really well on posted leads, and some work really well with, calls. And I see that too, because when I purchase leads, a partner can say, well, one of your competitors is doing really well with these types of leads. And that may work for us and it may not. And so, I try to be upfront. We do give them a shot, and we have a test budget and a time frame. We like to optimize it. And then, if there's times to do iterations, we'll do that. But we're very much test and learn. And so I'll provide as much feedback as possible. But at the same time, it's, again, if they just not getting it, then they're not getting it. They're not the type of people we want to work with.
How many, this is a random question from the audience, but how many of those states have opened up where you're starting to see in-home services? And Scott, feel free also, after Bastian answers, how many of those states are you starting to see? Is it a handful? Is it a minority, where you're getting back into normal?
Yeah, I think a majority of states are. Since the COVID thing started, from a technology standpoint, we have a software which we can use to, filter leads, append data and whatnot. And, we ran a filter that gets updated every single day from a zip list. So we have a master zip list, and if it's posted in an area that's either affected by COVID for the consumer, or, we have sales reps that go out, and sometimes a sales rep doesn't want to service an area. And if that's the case, then obviously we have to pull that out too. So I think we've, every day we're reducing a number of zips. There are some states that are pretty affected right now, but most of them are slowly decreasing.
We have about 4 minutes left. Is there anything from the panel that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention? I mean, obviously from the council standpoint, we briefly hit on the fact that you guys use third-party lead verification. I know that a lot of you are also looking at ad fraud technology to help eliminate it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to leave this. I'm just going to say quality versus quantity. Bastian, I'm on you. You're on the screen right now. Quality versus quantity. Does it matter to you?
Yeah, it's whatever you're set up for. Here at American Standard, it's definitely quality over quantity.
John?
There's not one answer. I would say it's actually comes down to the back end metric, which is dictated by the upfront price. That's how we're going to look at it. We're consumer direct, so we have different ways to work ourselves through those leads. But I think Scott said it earlier. I'll pay you all the money in the world for if you hit my last metric, which is closing at a great rate. But if it's a bunch of free iPad leads, then they're certainly going to have to be, you're going to have to change that price. And I will say since this may be the last time Rob lets me speak, working with Leads Council, when you're working through how you work with a new vendor, I think being part of Leads Council, that's a stamp of approval. We certainly know somebody's taken an interest in doing things the right way. Making investments in the front end, and that buyer's guide that I was talking about earlier, that is an example of if a lead seller has worked their way through that and knows what is of value to a buyer, that's important to us, and I think it overcomes a lot of that getting to know each other phase.
Well, and we've only got a couple of minutes. So John, thank you very much for plugging the council. I think that, it's obvious that you guys, although have a very performance driven backbone, quality and compliance are just part of the DNA in those requirements and KPIs that you run with all of your businesses. Mike, I've already given you the link. I know that you're going to help post that link so that the people on the call who are listening and watching the pre-recorded message, you have the ability to download the buyer's guide that everybody's mentioned on the call today, which will help further demystify what it's like to understand the lead buying ecosystem. And Mike, I can't thank you enough for giving us the opportunity to talk this morning. I think that it's been refreshing to hear from these different members and buyers in the ecosystem, what it's like to work with them. And so thank you very much again for letting us be up here.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. And I definitely will get that link on the agenda. If you're seeing this in the recording, you can always reach out to the Leads Council as well, or myself, and we'll pass it along to you as well. But thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of the day.